Welcome to the Betty Rocker Show, the place to be to nourish your mind, love your body, and rock your life. What's up, rock stars? Coach Betty Rocker here. Thanks so much for tuning in to spend some time with me today. And hey, I'm guessing you're here because maybe you're in the postmenopausal years, or you're thinking ahead and wondering what's on the horizon. Or maybe you're listening for an older relative or friend, hoping you can get some great insights to help them. No matter why you're here, I'm so glad, because today I'm going to tell you some of the most important things you need to know about training in those years after menopause. Menopause just means the end of your period, right? So postmenopause is how we refer to the years after it stops, and perimenopause is how we talk about the years leading up to it. And when you're done with today's episode, you'll know my Postmenopause Training Trifecta, my key formula for women in this life stage to really dial things in for yourself. And all of the links for today's episode and the transcript too are available in the show notes page for this episode right on the bettyrocker.com website. So you can find that and reference it absolutely anytime. And this stuff is just so important, right? Because I find we're so often underserved in this stage of life. And I hear from so many women that their concerns about, their weight gain or their hot flashes or their muscle loss, these concerns are just being dismissed or minimized, or they're told that's just the aging process. And of course, we are all going to age. There is a component of these changes that we all go through that is about acceptance and accepting that, life does have a progression. But I also know that a lot of the changes you may be experiencing can make you feel really powerless and like your body is a total stranger to you. And it does not help to be told that there's nothing you can do about it, because there actually is a lot you can do. Now, I might not have all the answers about what you are experiencing specifically, because we do all have unique health histories, and you, of course, are unique, but I do have some excellent custom training and nutrition strategies that really work for women post-menopause, and there is a lot more great scientific research emerging where it's focused specifically on women and starting to be more specifically focused on women in different life stages. And that is what I have been really immersed in recently. And I'm just really interested in how all of this works, because of course I'll be post-menopause myself very soon, and I'm fascinated, and I want to set myself up and in the process help set you up as well, and make sure that you know what I know, so that we can all get stronger together and enjoy life in these capable, strong bodies. After all, everything that we're doing right now sets us up for our future self. So, let's take a look back to see how we get to the postmenopausal stage of life and what led us here. So when we're in those regular cycling years, it's the fluctuation between our estrogen and progesterone that happen with our monthly menstrual cycle, which kind of give us an edge when it comes to building that muscle and reducing our body fat. And that regular cycle of those two key hormones fluctuating back and forth, as well as the higher levels of estrogen that we experience in general in those years, means that we recover a bit more easily. We have more resilience to training more frequently. We can regulate our body temperature more easily, and we just have an easier time in general rebuilding our muscle tissue than we do in the later life stages. Additionally, we also have our highest levels of testosterone during that time in our lives. And testosterone is a really important one for women and contributes to our libido function and the growth and renewal of our bone and body tissue, including our muscle tissue. Now, muscle tissue is what we call metabolic currency. So the more muscle you carry, the more efficiently you will burn body fat and regulate many body functions, including your immune system. And muscle is the body tissue we most want to hold on to as we go into the perimenopause years and then the postmenopause years. That muscle tissue doesn't make us bulky. It gives us our muscle tone, the tightness and strength in all of the activities that we do. Now, it was also easier for you to build and hold on to your muscle back then, despite all of the diets you maybe tried, one of the reasons for that is that we also were absorbing more of the amino acids from the protein we eat during those earlier life stages. And that really helped provide us with maximum access to the building blocks our bodies needed for muscle repair and regrowth after our workouts. Now, I'm not saying we didn't have to work for it back then, but it was a lot easier then than it is now for some of these reasons. So when we go through the perimenopause years, it's like this kind of transition phase when your menstrual cycle starts to become really erratic and the hormone levels can become really imbalanced as a result. And since most of our sex hormones are produced in our ovaries, as we have more sporadic and less menstrual cycles, we're producing less and less of these essential hormones that do so many important things for us. So perimenopause, that's the life stage where you may have first noticed your body just not responding as easily as it did before. And that might be, when you first started to struggle with your energy or your weight or mood, or you noticed your sleep got disrupted or your body temperature was dysregulated and you were having, hot flashes and things. So flash forward to now, we're in postmenopause. Our cycle has stopped completely and estrogen and progesterone levels have dropped down dramatically. So has testosterone. You might experience symptoms like weight gain, muscle and bone loss, which you might not notice at first. It can feel like you're just gaining weight, right? You might not realize, you're also losing muscle tissue and your bone density is decreasing. You might not notice that at first unless you're getting a specific test. You may notice things like erratic energy or lower energy in general. You may have more disrupted sleep, or you're just getting less sleep in general. You might still be having some hot flashes or mood swings. Your skin may be dry. Your joints may be more sore more often. Now, some of the symptoms you may experience can be addressed and mitigated by working with your doctor to monitor your hormone levels, and you might consider using some type of hormone replacement therapy, or HRT for short, to really help ease the transition symptoms and support your energy levels. Replacing some of the hormones that you've lost can really help make you feel a little bit more balanced. And in perimenopause, I've personally been using various forms of hormone replacement therapy off and on just for the past couple of years, and my doctor has suggested that I probably will want to continue some type of that through menopause and into postmenopause as well. And speaking of my doctor, that's Dr. Jill Carnahan. If you're interested in hormone replacement therapy and hearing about the different options available, there's a podcast where she came on recently and shared about hormone treatment options she offers her patients. That podcast also covers all the lab tests she likes to have people do as well. So if you just want to listen to the part about hormones, you can skip to the halfway point in that podcast episode, but I'll put a link to that episode in the show notes, because that's a really good one to listen to, because it's really interesting to hear a functional medicine doctor explain why she recommends some over others, and you can kind of learn the landscape of treatment options available and be a little more armed with the knowledge that you need when talking to your own doctor. And it's ideal, of course, to have blood work or a urine test done. For example, the Dutch test is one that's prescribed by your doctor to just determine what treatment option is right for you. Of course, when it comes to treating our hormones, we always want specificity. And then there are supplements like DHEA, which is a commonly available supplement that acts as a precursor to testosterone and estrogen. And that can also be really useful in stimulating their production. Again, I just suggest working with a doctor on dosing and determining if that's appropriate for you. But that's a really easy one to look up and read more about and find over the counter. And of course, while most of your sex hormones are made in your ovaries, some are also made by your adrenal glands. And as we lose our production of the majority of the sex hormones when our cycle stops, supporting a healthy stress response and robust adrenal function will really help keep the adrenals producing the low amounts of hormones that they're responsible for. And this can also contribute to how you feel and mitigate some of those more uncomfortable symptoms. You can support the production of some of your hormones over time, even postmenopause, with healthy adrenal function. And this is one of the reasons I'm always talking about and personally focusing on being proactive with building stress resilience in order to support a healthy stress response. Because when the stress hormone cortisol is elevated for prolonged periods of time, it really breaks down our muscle and it makes us more prone to store body fat. And as our estrogen levels really drop in postmenopause, we're even more sensitive to this cortisol impact, and it can make the muscle and bone loss we experience even greater. And we really want to be mindful of things like not over-consuming caffeine or overtraining, which we'll get to shortly, as these can really increase our cortisol levels. This is like a great time to start a daily meditation practice or breathing practice, or just make it a priority again if you've sort of fallen out of the habit of it. Even if you take like 5 minutes to sit and breathe or listen to the sounds of nature, this practice can really help ground you and bring you back into equilibrium and stimulate that parasympathetic or rest and digest nervous system response. And this over time, when you practice this regularly, can help you develop more resilience to the stress that you face in life, which in turn supports your system and those lower levels of estrogen that we have now. So if you want another podcast to listen to, I did one recently where I went more in depth in how the stress response impacts every system in our body at different life stages, and I gave you 12 ways to build more stress resilience. So that's a great episode to use for more ideas. Now, speaking of stress, adaptogenic herbs are also really promising for supporting the body's stress response and also supporting hormone balance. I have a great article about 6 adaptogenic herbs I studied for their balancing properties that I'll link to in the show notes for you if you want to follow up on that, or just do your own research about adaptogens in general. The 6 I featured included things like maca, rhodiola rosea, eleuthero root, and a few more, and they're just a few of the many natural herbal supplements that really can support your hormones. But these things take time to work. They are gentle, so you won't want to expect like an instant response. What you need will also be unique to you. Again, here's one where I recommend, having a baseline of your hormone testing done so that you could see what herbs might be really beneficial for you specifically. Like I was saying, while they're gentle, they still impact your body, and it is good to be a little bit customized with our approach. Just, knowing the body's changing and that we won't bounce back as quickly from an injury or build strength as quickly means that our self-care and the consistency with stress managing techniques, it becomes just very invaluable to helping our entire system work holistically as a whole. Because of course we lose some collagen and elastin over time, and just being more proactive with things like warming up and cooling down around your workouts, doing your stretching, your mobility work, maybe more yoga, those pieces can really help you stay more limber and more flexible and help support your joint health. And I'm going to talk more about that in a moment as well. Just wanted to remind you that the intentional mindful movement piece can really calm and restore our nervous system and lower the stress response, and they're just so essential. I feel like sometimes it's hard to get out of that like going hard all the time mentality, but this is exactly what we want to find balance with postmenopause, because overtraining and undereating are going to really backfire on us at this time. When it comes to your workouts, staying active and being consistent with your training is still super important. But this is the life stage where we want to get really strategic and specific about the training that we do, about how we take rest days, and about how we're eating around our workouts, rather than trying to follow every diet and every influencer with six-pack abs. I do see a lot of women just inadvertently making things harder for themselves by training more and eating less, and this sadly has the opposite effect, as it just creates a greater inflammatory response in the body, which leads to greater loss of muscle and even more increased fat storage. And I think one of the reasons a lot of women accidentally are overtraining postmenopause is because they expect to get results during their workouts. So more workouts must equal more results. And that's sort of the feeling that's there. But actually, muscle tissue does not develop or strengthen when you are exercising. It develops and strengthens after your workout and after you have challenged yourself, when you are resting and refueling. So when you're working out, you're breaking down your muscle tissue. You're creating an inflammatory response in your body. And it's during the recovery period where we're rebuilding. And this is also, I think, one of the reasons why a lot of women undereat. We think that eating less means we're going to become smaller. And depriving the body of nutrients actually means we create this really stressful environment internally that deprives us of the building blocks we need to hold on to our muscle. It weakens our bones, it diminishes our energy, and it creates more fat storage. It's just that during the postmenopause life stage especially, we need a little bit more of a workout stimulus to get those adaptations to rebuild the muscle tissue, to stimulate fat loss. We need a little bit more protein stimulus to help repair and rebuild the tissue that we break down in a workout. And we need a little bit more of an intentional recovery period to support the tissue repair and regrowth process. This is the path to seeing great results again. We just have to really dial in and get more strategic and specific in our approach. And this is totally accessible and it totally works. So we want to do a sort of polarized sequence with our exercise and our rest days to really drive those results in our body composition. So remember what I was saying, how when we are working out, we create like an inflammatory response in our tissue. We're creating these micro tears in the muscle tissue. This is why I always say exercise is a healthy stress to the body when we are healthy, because exercising when our system is already stressed out does not contribute to muscular strength or fat loss. It creates more muscle loss, and it can be a contributing factor in fat storage. So if you don't get enough rest, you'll just stay in an inflamed state from your workouts and not be able to repair that muscle tissue, which means you'll always be losing it faster than you can rebuild it. And this is where a lot of women go wrong. They keep training and training and training and thinking they're going to lose the weight, but it's actually keeping them stuck in an inflamed state that contributes to that weight gain and that muscle loss. And not to mention, a heightened state of inflammation doesn't do us any favors in general. It weakens our immune system. It means that we're not probably absorbing the nutrients in our foods as easily. It's contributing to achy joints and soreness that just doesn't go away sometimes. So really paying attention to the recovery you need post-menopause is crucial. In the past, those higher levels of key hormones, like we talked about, allowed you to kind of get away with a little bit more. You could recover a little bit more quickly because you had more estrogen in your system. But at this stage of life where we just don't have those hormones to help us sort of bounce back more quickly, we can seek an alternative pathway to the tissue to support it. And we do that by just getting smarter about creating an effective stimulus with the workouts we do. And then we give our body long enough to recover around the workouts to repair and regrow in the absence of those hormones. Now, an effective stimulus just means that your training is challenging enough for you to stimulate the muscle tissue to respond. And when you do workouts that really challenge you, triggering that adaptive response in your muscles, then because you triggered that stimulus effectively, you then want to recover without forcing yourself back into another workout. There are 3 specific types of training that will help you improve your muscle and bone density and lose body fat, including resistance training, which I know you've heard of, high intensity interval training, which is going to be things like explosive cardio, plyometrics, Tabatas, sprint training. All of these can be types of high intensity interval training. And the third one is actually self-care training types, which we've touched on already, which are the yoga, the mobility, and stretching you do around your workouts. So when it comes to the resistance training piece, this is incredibly beneficial for your body, and the amount of resistance that is right for you, where you're going to be getting that effective stimulus like we talked about, really depends on what you've been doing before. And if you're new to training and maybe building a base up, body weight training is a great way to build a strong foundation and really challenge you appropriately as you are building strength and balance and confidence. If you've mostly been doing body weight training, now is the time to start to explore how you can make that more challenging for yourself and start to add some weighted objects to some of the moves that you've been doing to trigger even more of a stimulus to your muscle tissue. Of course, if you've already been training with some equipment like dumbbells or bands, maybe now you want to start getting more specific with how you approach using the resistance. So if you could start working within rep ranges, say an 8 to 12 rep range, for example, you're going to give yourself a ceiling of how much weight is appropriate for you to use and a benchmark to really get stronger from. So if you choose a weight for bicep curls and you can do 20 reps with that weight, go heavier. You want to find a weight that makes it very hard to go past the 12 reps, but that you could do at least 8 reps with. And you'll of course need to do some experimenting with this, but you want to try some different things out and start to build your confidence in doing things with more and more of that resistance, because your muscle tissue adapts to the load that you give it over time. And so you want to continue to progress and challenge yourself. Now, as you build confidence with this type of training, you will get stronger. You will need heavier weight to do the same amount of reps as before so that you can keep going. And if you start finding an 8-rep weight range that's fatiguing you, you can start building into even lower rep ranges and using heavier resistance, working into, say, a 6 to 8 rep range with some of your moves, and maybe even down to a 4 to 6 rep range with some of your moves. Now, this is something that you might want to do with friends or with a trainer in person, or of course if you're using any of my programs, we provide really thoughtful guidelines and form cues, and we help you progress through all of these different types of training options, especially in Rock Your Life, where we have the complete spectrum. And if you're training from home and you want to go heavier, you might want to slowly start expanding on your collection of home workout equipment, or maybe you want to go to the gym and start using the options that they have there. I just don't recommend going from body weight training straight up to barbells in a day. What I do recommend is starting to get more specific and strategic with what challenges you and start to really push yourself in the workouts that you do. You know, sometimes we're going through the motions with light resistance, thinking that's toning us up, when what we really need to be doing is focusing on that muscle tone and the way to stimulate the muscle to respond and strengthen, which is done when you work against enough of a load where you are challenged personally, because that's what will trigger those muscular adaptations and get that tissue to strengthen in the absence of your old higher estrogen levels. And of course you want more muscle as you age, like we talked about, because it's just going to support and surround your joints. It makes you a more efficient fat burner. It gives you strength and power. And if you're training and eating to support that muscle, you're also supporting your bone density. You're also going to become a more efficient fat burner. So just don't shy away from strengthening your body and preserving or developing your muscle tissue. It's so crucial. Now, the second piece is to add in the high intensity interval training, or HIIT, which is short burst cardio, like we were saying, plyometrics, jumping, sprint training, interval training, all of that type of work that helps get your heart rate up for a short duration. You know, rather than making every cardio session you do a long one, or, you know, a ton of repetitive impact on your joints, short burst training is a highly efficient type of training that yields better results in the long run, and it contributes to really strong joints and it strengthens your muscle tissue. You can even do it on the same day as your resistance training, or you can do a low impact resistance training session one day and a dedicated high intensity interval session the next day. There's a lot of different ways that you can pair this type of training. It doesn't have to be one or the other. If you struggle with cardio at all, you know, short burst training sessions can be a great way to slowly ramp up your endurance and your stamina. And if you need to do a lower impact version of a high intensity move, you want to take a modified version as you get stronger and do what gets your heart rate up. It's all about meeting yourself where you're at with things like resistance training and high intensity interval training. You might hear other people talk about this one specific thing that you have to do, but there are different ways to build into all of these different pieces of advice that you hear out there. So I'm always showing the low impact version of high intensity moves in my workout videos, so you can watch for modifications and ramp things up as you feel comfortable. And if you're already there, be my guest. I mean, go for it. You know, we all have to start somewhere, and we're sometimes going to have different days where we're just not as well rested and we need a lower impact variation. So you don't have to be going super hard all the time, right? So listen to your body first and foremost. As a side note about the cardio, I do hear from a lot of runners who notice more aches and pains than they used to, especially when they're getting into those menopausal years. This is a sure sign that their body is just not able to recover, either because they're not resting enough to handle the inflammatory burden that's created from their training, or they're not eating enough protein to support the repair process their body goes through after their training session. So if that long, slow distance type of training is something you really enjoy, work it in more strategically, maybe a little less, and just pair it with more resistance training to strengthen the hardworking muscles around your joints, and also really work on more self-care. Get on your foam roller more, do more stretching, do more yoga, and instead of just making that repetitive impact the same all the time, the only way that you're training. Now, speaking of those self-care pieces, this is the third part of your training that's just essential. This is the time to really focus on keeping your muscle tissue healthy. You might need a little more time to warm up before a workout than you used to, and if you're training at a higher volume level than you used to, you definitely want to be warmed up going in. So I'm talking about if you're, lifting heavy weights, whatever's heavy for you, you might want to warm your body up with some light activity before you get into that. Sometimes you can use the beginning of a workout to warm up, going at like a lower intensity than whatever we're going to be doing in the workout. But if you have the time, you might want to get on your foam roller and spend a few minutes warming up the fascial connective tissue and just preparing for your training with some dynamic type movements. And of course, post-workout, when your body's still warm, doing a little cooling down stretching can be a great way to transition from an intense workout session and bring your heart rate down. And also, it's supporting your joint health and your mobility. And speaking of mobility, adding mobility or yoga sessions on rest days is a great way to really support your flexibility and help your muscle tissue stay supple and responsive to resistance training, which will also really help support your joint health. Now, I'm sure you know the importance of regular movement throughout the day, but it is worth mentioning that a lot of our fat loss comes from the low-key daily activities that we do, like walking. So stay moving and try to avoid long periods of sitting. So to just recap on training strategies, how do you sequence a training plan to be the right balance for yourself? I suggest a couple of simple schedules to help you get the most out of your training while also having enough recovery. You could combine your high-intensity interval training and your resistance training on the same day, or do them on different days. Do what you have the energy for. You could train hard Monday, Wednesday, Friday, taking recovery days in between, and then focusing on your mobility or your yoga on the weekends. Or even add some drills in on your rest days if that feels good to you. Rest days can be active rest days, get walking in and keep moving. The high volume training that challenges you, either the resistance training or high intensity interval training or both, is done on those workout scheduled days. That's the main point. And you don't do that type of training. You don't try to sneak in more training on rest days. Another way to approach this might be, say, complementary workouts on a Monday, Tuesday. We just don't want to do the same thing on back-to-back days, right? And then Wednesday we rest, then say Thursday, Friday, we're training at a higher volume with complementary workouts, and then the weekend is more of that active self-care and recovery time. Those are just a couple of samples and ideas for you, and I have those types of training layouts put together for you in my Rock Your Life Challenge programs. My challenges have custom sequences called tracks that offer polarized training and recovery days so you can harness the power of resistance training and explosive cardio for yourself and get the right amount of rest to see your body respond. Plus, I build in all those self-care pieces to help you with every program, so you just have everything at your fingertips, the guided stretching, the mobility that you need to care for your joints, the yoga, all of that great stuff. So check out Rock Your Life. Okay, so let's talk about another essential piece of the puzzle, the nutrient tweaks that really make a big impact on your body. One is that you really need more protein than you used to, and I've alluded to this a few other times as we've been talking. And I know that you've heard me say this probably before on the blog or in other podcasts. If you don't have enough amino acids from the protein that you eat circulating in your system throughout the day, and your body needs to use them, it breaks down your muscle tissue to access the aminos that are stored there. Now, this is a totally natural process, but if we are breaking our muscle tissue down too often without enough rebuilding, we're going to end up losing our muscle tissue faster. So the amino acids that we get from our protein foods, they really play so many important roles. They contribute to muscle tissue repair and regrowth, which we were just talking about. They also contribute to the health of our immune system, our cognitive function and mood. They support the production of the neurotransmitters. They also form the building blocks of our hormones, and they're building blocks of enzymes as well, which are also important messengers. We don't absorb the amino acids from our protein as easily as we age, which means that we need to eat a little bit more of it to do the same amount of tasks as before. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of women start to see such a change in their body composition in the menopausal years. We just keep losing muscle because we're not eating as much protein as our bodies need to maintain our muscle tissue and do all of the other jobs. You can maintain a lot of your muscle tissue even without much exercise if you eat enough protein. We just want to include it in every meal that we eat and really pay attention to fueling around our workouts to optimize our body's ability for that tissue repair and that muscle protein synthesis. So that's the rebuilding of our muscle tissue. Active women under 40 can really make do with something like 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal, which is a wide range, but active women over 40 should really aim for more like 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal, assuming about 3 meals per day. And this is really just a range and a starting point. So just consider it as a data point that might be helpful to aim for or look into. Some people may need more, some people may need less. It's just important to know that really in relation to where you were in your younger years, you do need a little bit more to do the same amount of work as before to give your body the building blocks that it needs for all those things that we talked about that we need amino acids for, in addition to preserving our muscle tissue. Now, of course, protein isn't the only important nutrient on our plate. Of course, carbohydrates are very important. They're broken down into glucose, which can be used for immediate energy, or they can be sent to our liver for storage and our muscle tissue for storage in the form of glycogen. Your body really needs this fuel for energy and performance in your workouts and for your recovery as well. If you don't have that ready energy source, your body is going to break down your muscle tissue, which of course we want to avoid. Fiber is an important component in whole food carbs that slows the release of sugar into the bloodstream, which is going to give you more steady energy and support your healthy gut bacteria and your immune system. And it also really supports an optimal digestive flow. Those fiber-rich carbs we eat from our fruits and vegetables and whole grains are very satisfying and they digest slowly. Plus, they won't trigger an insulin response like high sugar foods or processed foods will. So we want to really make them our go-to energy source because, of course, we're just a little bit more sensitive to insulin when estrogen levels decline. If there was ever a time in your life to be mindful of sugar consumption, this is it. Protein can actually really help with that if you struggle with sugar cravings. It's the most satisfying nutrient, even more so than fat or carbs, and eating enough of it can really help balance out and reduce cravings for sugar. Plus, of course, it helps us do all of those other important jobs as well. One of the impacts that too much sugar can have on our bodies is lowering our testosterone levels. And if they're already lower in this life stage, we're really losing any residual access to our testosterone if we're constantly overeating sugar. Alcohol consumption is also going to lower our testosterone. So just be mindful and aware that, these things, we're just more sensitive to them. They can really contribute to greater bone loss and muscle loss and just be really harder on our system at this time. Dietary fat helps fuel your muscles for low to moderate intensity activities, and that healthy fat in your meals is very satisfying. It can help you feel more full when you include it in balance with your other nutrients. And it also helps to slow down how quickly food exits your stomach, which really helps to keep your blood sugar levels stable, which prevents an insulin spike that can trigger fat storage. So keep in mind that some vitamins that your body really needs, like A, D, E, and K, are all fat-soluble vitamins, and they can't be absorbed in your body without the presence of the dietary fat. So having enough healthy fat in your diet really provides you with that lasting energy for your workouts and your daily activities. Along with the glycogen, which is how your body stores the glucose from the carbohydrates, your fat is burned during exercise and low impact activities to really spare the vital amino acids from protein in your muscle tissue. So really just creating a balanced plate at the end of the day is really important, and reducing your intake of sugar, processed foods, and alcohol just because of how much harder they hit you. And just thinking about how your nutrients really impact your body's ability to harness the benefits of the workouts that you do is really important. And this whole thing just kind of works together as a whole. So if you want my postmenopause training trifecta, here is what you need to know. So number one, your training program should include resistance training and high intensity interval training, be challenging for you where you're at, and include self-care, like warming up and cooling down, using a foam roller, stretching, mobility drills, those types of things. Rest days are number two, and those should really be real rest days, not trying to sneak in a long run or an extra workout. Of course, you can do some mobility or self-care on those days. You should walk more and move around, but remember, you're also giving your body recovery time so that you can hit your next high volume workout hard so that you can really drive those adaptations. And then number 3 is to increase your protein intake and fuel around your workouts so that you have the building blocks you need to support your training and your daily needs for amino acids and fill your plate with fiber-rich whole food carbs and healthy fats. All right, that was the trifecta. You got it? Great. Now, if you want some help implementing those key pieces together, I will mention again that in Rock Your Life, my online home fitness membership for women that includes workout programs and challenges, I have over 60 different workout programs that all include custom training plan options for women in the menopause years. That means you can start where you're at, whether you're working out from home or you're in the gym. You can do bodyweight workouts with some minimal equipment, or you can ramp it up as you get stronger, even using heavier equipment if you have those options. There are low impact challenges and support for those beginning or rebuilding. We have the intermediate challenges to help you progress from that level up through and build more strength. And we have the more advanced options as well, so that you can really see yourself get stronger and enjoy the variety that all of my training programs provide, with custom training scheduled tracks that really give you that strategic recovery, that polarization of your workouts and your recovery days, so that you can build that strength in your body and create those adaptations in your muscle tissue to help you lose more body fat, get stronger, stay supported as you go through time, and just really feel your best. I love Rock Your Life. It's such an incredible, holistic women's fitness program, and it's just designed for women in all ages. So I really would welcome you to take a 30-day trial if you're new, and that's over at thebettyrocker.com/coaching, and I would love to see you there. And hey, thanks so much for listening today, Rockstar. I hope you got some cool ideas and some insights. Please share them with your friends, and I really look forward to hearing from you. Like I mentioned before, you can find all of the notes for today, links to the things I mentioned over on the show notes page at thebettyrocker.com. And I really hope that you follow up and try out this information that I shared. And of course, I also really look forward to our next conversation. So thanks so much for listening. Till then, I'm Betty Rocker, and you are so awesome, blossom, and amazing. Bye for now.
This podcast is for information purposes only. Statements and views expressed on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Brie Argettsinger, Betty Rocker Inc., and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. Before starting a new exercise, fitness or health protocol, or if you think you have a medical problem, always consult a licensed physician.